It wasn't ceremonious, but it wasn't nothing for the Indiana Pacers at the 2025 trade deadline. They move on from James Wiseman. He's headed to the Toronto Raptors. They take back some flexibility. We'll explain why it makes sense and talk about them not doing anything else on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Thursday, and welcome into a little bonus edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, diving in to the trade deadline. It has come, it has gone. The Pacers mostly stood pat, as I expected, but they did the one thing I've been warning you guys could and likely should be coming. James Wiseman out the door, getting off of his contract. The main incentive there, he's headed to the Raptors, and the Pacers now have a non-full roster to manage and add to if they want to. Derek Kramer is going to join us today for my Pacers blog. We'll get into all the layers of this, why the Pacers did it, why it makes sense for the Raptors, why the Pacers can do now, why I don't expect them to do anything right away, and what you could see them do when they actually do use that roster spot and that flexibility this season. Lots of good stuff today. Let's just get right to it. It is post-trade deadline officially, which means Derek Kramer is back, and the Pacers traded the only guy I thought made sense for them to trade with more than any shred of them getting a big return back. James Wiseman out the door to the Raptors, a hilarious conditional second-round pick in to the Pacers. We'll break down the why and how. But Derek, congratulations on not being traded in a 5-team trade today. How are you?
I'm great. I get to still live where I live. I don't have to move away. Yeah, it was just a long anticipation waiting for the very, very likely to happen Wiseman trade, and then just following along with everything else today.
Pretty much the same as me. So for those who don't know yet somehow or want the full details, well, James Wiseman is headed from the Pacers to the Raptors, which is possible because he is on a minimum contract. Any team that doesn't have a hard cap blocking them from doing so can take in a minimum. The Raptors are far enough from any aprons or tax lines that they're willing to do so. So that's how Wiseman for no player happens. The Pacers are giving the Raptors cash considerations, more cash than the remaining value of James Wiseman's contract. So they are gaining money. The rest of it can go towards Wiseman. They get some extra. So that's their incentive to do it. They have to send the Pacers something. So they sent the Pacers a 2026 second-round pick that is top 55 protected. If you'd like this trade to be as good as possible, you would like to see the Toronto Raptors somehow be one of the best 5 teams in the NBA next year. Pacers don't really care about that. They care about the financial part of this, getting off of Wiseman's money and now being about $2.4 million away from the tax. Derek, what do you think? Was this worth it to you? I think I'll go first here. No-brainer to me. I would have done this immediately.
Yeah, agreed. I think the only question was whether they were going to have to give more than just cash to do it. Like if they couldn't find anybody to just take him for cash, if it was just going to take like a fake second or something that could actually convey to another team as a pick, I thought, yeah, this just made too much sense. As even if you're somebody who believes in Wiseman as a prospect, like the Pacers just can't go into like you've talked about many times, they can't go into the playoffs with basically 3 guys who can't contribute on the court. So they had to do something like this, and Wiseman's the obvious candidate. Just made too much sense. I thought they did as good as they possibly could do in this scenario. You weren't going to get anything in return for a guy who's not going to play for the rest of the season. And, we just joked about, the Raptors did get better. They did get Brandon Ingram. So who knows? Maybe they somehow become just an amazing team with a worse version of who they were a couple years ago.
I have long thought that Brandon Ingram and Emmanuel quickly could unlock each other. So that is exactly what the Raptors do. They might be better than I'm giving them credit for, but they're not going to be a top 5 team. Blake Murphy in Toronto reported not very long ago that he believes the plan. I just retweeted this. He is hearing that the Raptors may not even look at Wiseman. They might just literally waive him. So that doesn't surprise me at all. The Raptors part doesn't really matter here to me unless they are a top 5 team next year. The Pacers part does. So they are now $2.4 million from the tax at this point in the season. That is manageable. One, because they have some bonuses. In fact, the total amount of their bonuses, if every single player on their roster got it, is $2.46 million. If every single one hits, they'd pay the tax. However, if all of them hit, it means the Pacers won the championship because of what one of them is. So they'll be happy to do that, right? So they're basically free of their tax situation right this second. However, what I think they will do, and the strongest incentive to do this, as you already said, and what I've said many times, is they can now bring in a 15th player that can play not every night, but like in a pinch, right? Which they need that for the postseason. Just ask the Knicks, who were like literally out of players by the end of their series with the Pacers. The Bucks were getting low on available talent in their series with the Pacers. So they needed a way to bring in someone else. They don't have to do it right away. We'll talk about what they could do, but they are kind of lucky too that very infrequent injuries to Turner and Thomas Bryant since the Bryant trade made them able to get here without needing a center way sooner, right? So I would assume that near the top of the to-do list would be a third center just in case, but they can now do lots of stuff, and I can get into more semantics in a second. Where would you look first for an addition to this team?
Yeah, center makes the most sense. I don't know how much of a rush they'll be to do it, and they probably don't want to get in the same situation they were when it was very dire and they were desperate and they had to get Moses Brown after that Raptors game where they basically had no centers, because I still don't think Enrique Freeman is really ready to play the 5 at this level yet.
I agree.
That might be his best spot eventually, but I think right now, if he's going to play NBA minutes, you might want him more as a 4. And even then, he's probably just not ready to be an NBA guy yet. So that's an option too, like converting a 2-way guy down the line, finding one of those guys. But I think center makes the most sense just because we've seen how dire it can be if they lose another center right now. If Thomas Bryant goes out, obviously if Turner goes down, they're kind of screwed at this point.
Yeah.
Which is why
the Thomas Bryant starts have gone so well. So actually, one of them went okay. Yeah.
Very
well.
One of them
went very well. One did not.
Yeah, they won both games though. So
they did. That's right. 2-0 to starter.
But yeah, which is exactly why the Myles Turner trades made zero sense the entire time. A+ tweet by Myles today. If you didn't see it, where we'll
talk about it later.
Yes. Okay. We can bring that up later.
Amazing though. I actually laughed out loud. Yeah. And it was still not 3:00 yet, so I appreciated that from him. Thank you, Myles.
Fantastic. But yeah, center makes the most sense. I would love to see a reunion with O'Shea Brissett. But that obviously he's not a center, but we've seen him play emergency center before, oddly against Moses Brown in that one game against the Thunder multiple years ago. That would be my non-center guy that I wouldn't mind seeing. We know how much of a relationship he has with Ty, and they're still very close. But yeah, I don't have any particular targets in mind at the center. I think it's just most likely they'll find somebody that is a center to eventually add.
So the easy case to do this is they have their 10-man rotation now. Then their 3 healthy guys that were left pre-trade deadline were Jarris Walker, Johnny Furphy, and James Johnson. They're all forwards. You don't need a forward, right? It's not good to lose wing depth or forward depth, but they're good there, right? No problem. If McConnell or Nembhard or Haliburton got hurt, they still would have 2 point guards. If they signed a 4th, I would be like, I guess I get it, but they don't need that as much. They have other ball handling on the team. I don't think that'd be as pressing or as damaging as an injury to a center would be. So I agree, as I already said, that third center would be where I would be looking at first. Hey, Daniel Tice just got waived by OKC if they're looking for a reunion there. Regardless of who it specifically is, I think that's what I would be trying to do as the Pacers. And now I'm going to get a little nerdy, Derek. So you got to bear with me, and then everybody else has to bear with me. The real benefit of this is the number of ways they could actually do anything now, right? So it's December. What am I saying? It's February 6th right now. I would just guess that they're not going to do anything with their open spot through the All-Star break. Maybe they could, but it's only like a little over a week away. Not even a week away right now. Post-break, though, they could now sign a 10-day. A 10-day for even a veteran only costs this. I'm on the wrong Excel sheet. Only costs this season about $119,000, a little under 120, right? They could afford 2 of those. They could afford lots of those. So they could try somebody there. But I don't think they would sign anyone to any permanence until March, because March 1st is the last day that people talk about the buyout market, that players can be waived by their former team and then sign with a new team and still be playoff eligible. If you're waived March 2nd or later, you're not playoff eligible with any other team. So a lot of teams like to wait and see what that market is. Conveniently, Derek, March 5th is the final day teams can sign 2-way contract players to new deals. So there's that 4-day window where you know the buyout market as the Pacers, and you could know if it's worth it to sign someone that isn't Enrique Freeman, or if you're going to just convert Enrique Freeman, which I won't get into the pros and cons of that specifically right this second, but you could get a different 2-way player like they did last year, which got them Quentin Jackson, which turned out to actually be pretty helpful, converting Kendall Brown last year, which was possible because of trade deadline moves getting off of some guys. All this to say, they now have the option of 10-day or multiple 10 days, try lots of guys and see who that could be. They could convert Freeman. They still have the disabled player exception for Isaiah Jackson. They still have their full MLE if they want to give somebody cheap enough a 4-year deal in theory. I don't think they would do that, but it's possible. They have a trade exception created from this Wiseman trade that in theory could do. There's just so many little things now that are available to them to do this. But I don't think, like I said, anything permanent would happen until March, and you've been around these buyouts long enough to know how it goes. How would you weigh a Freeman conversion versus trying someone or doing the typical Pacers reward a man ant 10-day stretch, or how all that could phase through? I don't know. I just lost my train of thought mid-sentence, so that's the answer you get. Everybody, quick little break here to talk about PrizePicks. Basketball season's heating up. There's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in awarded winnings, PrizePicks makes it easy and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Here's how it works. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick, you're cashing out. Many more things you could look at, more or less for Jason Tatum on his points, more or less for Luka Doncic on his assists when he debuts with the Lakers. You can set your lineup in 60 seconds or less. They have secure withdrawals, so you get paid quickly when you win. Tons of promos. It is a blast. So download the app today. Use the code LOCKDOWNNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKDOWNNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.
Yeah, and I think like the flexibility that you're talking about, like that's the key here. They have lots of options, lots of things they can do. I personally would like the kind of see where a need might be and then use your 10-day contracts that way. And just say, okay, if this guy, okay, maybe a center did get hurt, and now we can sign this guy to a 10-day. But if it's a minor thing, like we're not going to just commit to it for the full season. We'll just use a 10-day, maybe sign him to a second one if needed. And then if that guy works out, like okay, yeah, he's good enough. We would just go ahead and keep him the rest of the year. Or you do that in a situation, maybe you do want to use a slot for a point guard if like 1 or 2 of them went down and you're not comfortable with Ray J. Dennis kind of filling in as a backup in spurts, or you don't want to go to Point Jarris or something, which I don't know why they would do that in an actual non-garbage time situation, but you know what I mean? So I think the going the 10-day route makes the most sense to me until it's time to make a decision and commit to somebody, unless they're just like, they really like somebody that's on the open market right now. It would be surprising to me if Tice would even want to come back.
Yeah, I know.
If they were like really,
he just got waived today, and people were like, "Oh, he was on the bad." Yeah,
he did not have fun while he was here.
It just wasn't a good fit of pace of player and pace of team. It's fine,
right?
Just how it is.
Like obviously he's a veteran center, which would be perfectly fine to just kind of sit on the bench, but he's probably had his fill of just sitting on the bench with the Pacers already.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the kind of trying some guys out, seeing what they might need for a little bit, using it that way, like keeping their flexibility as long as possible before kind of making their final decision makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, so the key date's going to be basically a month from now, that March 5th date, because that's the last day of the 2-way conversions. And by then, if they haven't converted a 2-way guy, then you can assume it's an external guy. But by then, you would know who every available player is as the Pacers. And on one hand, waiting to, in theory, start paying that player helps you if your bonuses all hit. They get some insurance in that way from this trade. On the other hand, getting them in as early as possible lets them have as much time to blend with the new team and figure things out and be ready to go should playoff time actually be required. They've had good success with Trevor Booker in the postseason and Wes Matthews. So biomarket's been okay to them in my time covering the team. So it's impossible to say what makes the most sense for them to do with it without knowing what all is available. But they do actually have options to add something that can help them or at least make them go, oh, phew, we're not screwed if Myles Turner gets hurt or if Thomas Bryant gets hurt, which is worth more than an injured James Wiseman. And I would conclude this segment on a James Wiseman trade by saying, this sucks. Even if I wasn't as high on the signing as like basically any fan was, a young, interesting player getting hurt in the first game and it changes the team's whole season, and then he has to get traded and might not finish with any, like, that just sucks, man. What I feel about his talent doesn't matter. He could have developed here like a lot of guys have in the last couple of years, and he didn't even get the chance, and now he's just salary dumped, and it's not the Pacers' fault. They couldn't plan for him getting hurt in the first game. It's not his fault. He couldn't plan for getting hurt in the first game, or that Isaiah Jackson would then immediately get hurt 2 weeks later. It just sucks. But this is how NBA business works. You have to deal with the punches you're given, and they did. I just hate that it came to this.
Yeah, it reminds me of it doesn't sting as much for me, but it reminds me of Edmund Sumner tearing his Achilles, and then they didn't really have much of a choice. Like, they went ahead and traded him and kind of got something. And yeah, it happens. It sucks. It's kind of one of the worst parts about this kind of thing, where like you can't just put a guy on injured reserve or whatever and open a roster spot, or it still counts towards your tax and all that stuff. Like, yeah, it's just a bummer.
Hoping for the best for James Wiseman. Maybe a team will still believe in his potential next year, including potentially the Pacers. Let's pivot to the other part of this, Derek. None of the other 14 players got traded. Most of them didn't make sense to me right this second to be moved. Did you have any surprise when you saw that the Lakers are trading their 2031 first last night? Did you go for a second? How did you process all this?
No, I just had no doubt. Like, it didn't make any sense that Myles was gonna be traded. All signs were like the Pacers were probably only going to do this. I think Rick Carlisle even said, like, no, I don't expect anything to happen on the radio yesterday or 2 days ago or something. Myles Turner's great tweet with the Survivor logo, surviving another deadline. I think the time where it made the most sense for the Pacers to trade him was the year they traded everybody else and they got Tyrese, and then Myles happened to be hurt at that deadline. I think that is the one where if he wasn't hurt, he might not still be here. But other than, like, it just made zero sense this year. I know you've talked about this a million times. Like, unless they're getting a starting center back, which isn't a trade that happens very often, it just makes no sense to get rid of him with how well the Pacers are playing. They have home court right now in the playoffs for the first round. Like, just zero sense. He fits too well. It makes way more sense to just kind of go into the summer, see if you can figure things out, sign and trade potentially, maybe, if it doesn't.
I said that the only way I'd think about it as the Pacers is if I'm getting another very, very, very good center back, or else you're just throwing away this season. Let's talk about all the centers who got traded today, Derek. Let's just run through the list. Alex Len got traded by the Sacramento Kings today. Cody Zeller got traded by the Atlanta Hawks today. Yusuf Nurkic got traded by the Phoenix Suns today. I think I'm missing a couple. Hang on. Oh, Mark Williams got traded last night, obviously. That one, when I saw the Lakers were trading, I was like, oh, I got to open that one pretty quick. You never know. Even though I didn't expect it to be them. Jericho Sims got traded. Jonas Valanciunas got traded. And Daniel Tice got traded. So I guess Tice counts as a starter because he did start, even though he's not starter quality. And Valanciunas is going to be Sabonis' backup. So maybe one starting center got traded at this deadline. Maybe. In Mark Williams. I mean, it was just never going to happen. I never thought it made sense anyway. The guys that made more sense to me also did not get moved. And the time just is tough for that kind of thing when you can't take back more money and you're a good team. And, the team right behind you might have just gotten worse at this deadline. And the team 2 spots behind you might have also just gotten worse at this trade deadline. I don't know how much that in theory changed their motivations, but nothing that happened made me go, oh, the Pacers should have done that or jumped in on that with this rotation player. So I'm not surprised at all about what they've done. One more break here, guys. Let's talk about FanDuel. Super Bowl 59. It's here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook, whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That is on FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, an official partner of Super Bowl 59.
Yeah, like maybe you would have liked the Pacers to try to figure out something to get DeAndre Hunter if you're a big Hunter guy.
Disagree, by the way. People love that trade for the Cavs. He had negative trade value like 4 months ago. Like, I get that he's played well this season, but good job by the Hawks striking while the iron's hot there.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't get that much. Like, the Hawks didn't for him, right? Like, you gave up. I'm not a big LeVert guy, so like I think Hunter fits what they needed more than what LeVert.
Yeah, Ty Jerome being good made Karras expendable for them. Yeah.
So I'm
that one.
Seems like having wing-sized players is like the Cavs. Like that's what.
Holler Struz, great, good job. I guess that is worth something to them.
Yeah. There wasn't anything out there that I was like, man, really wish obviously you wish the Pacers could have got Luka. But yeah. I mean, other than that, like
if they knew he was available, they would have, right? They would have offered everything, right? I would have if I'm them.
Yeah, it's just if only Nico was just great friends with Kevin Pritchard for 20 years.
And he used to rep someone on the Pacers at Nike somehow. Yeah, that would be a way. Once these are all settled, I want to talk about which trades I think impact the Pacers the most. Do you off the cuff have any that hit you hard? Because I think you could argue, I think the Cavs got better still in that trade, even though I think the Hawks did well. That every team in their division's about the same, and the conference ahead of them, only the Cavs made an upgrading move. Like it really wasn't that scary, air quotes, of a deadline for them.
Yeah, I think the scariest was the Hornets, like trading away Mark Williams, maybe having a bunch of cap space to like maybe be a Miles Suter in the summer.
I'm going to send you a picture of my notes later. You will die laughing because I had this exact train of thought. Continue.
Yeah. And Rhett, I think mentioned that on Twitter too. So like, that was like the scariest part of the deadline is like, oh, there might be another Miles Suter. The Bucks got easier to dislike as a Pacers fan, adding Kevin Porter Jr. I thought the Bucks trading away Middleton for Kyle Kuzma just gave me flashbacks to the Danny Granger for Evan Turner trade. That's what it reminds me of personally. I'm not a big fan of the Bucks moves. It might work out for him, but yeah, if I can't think of anything other than great. The Lakers have another star for a decade plus.
And they got a center. No more. Unless
if he ever plays, if he's ever on the court.
Continues to be hurt there. Yeah. I saw today or yesterday that Dalton Connect has played more games this season than Mark Williams ever has in one season, which is insane to see written.
Yep, I tweeted that. Yep.
Oh, that was you? That's funny. The timeline is.
Might have been somebody else too. I don't know. Somebody else might have said this.
But I would believe it. So in the end, the real acquisition for the Pacers at the trade deadline, we won't know for a couple weeks, I would guess. Maybe they could sign a 10-day like tomorrow, right? And have that player through the All-Star break. I don't think they would unless somebody actively got hurt between now and then. But this is about what I expected from them. And next year will be a bunch of different yet similar conversations. And like you said, the Hornets, I guess, the Pistons didn't really take on any long-term money either. So maybe there's some summer conversations to have from this. I'll have to run through my sheets and update stuff to see. But I think that given how the league activity went, given who turned out to be available, and given the low cost that came to pass on dumping James Wiseman for flexibility, this was about what I expected their trade deadline to be. I can't even grade it. There's nothing to say. Like,
they did what they had to do.
Dumping Wiseman sucks, and they had to do it. And there's no grade. Like, there's nothing that can go wrong. Maybe they signed someone else, and that player sucks. But the problem isn't the trade. Then it's the signing, right? So there's no grade to give. They just did the right thing for them, and they should be better-ish or more insured for the postseason for it. And it's not fun when you have 2 Achilles tears in 6 months, and your whole season is dictated by how you're going to trade for centers. But this season, their big trade deadline acquisition is actually Thomas Bryant, who they got 2 months ago. So, alas, not as fun as last year in terms of the names. Still fun for me in the salary cap dorkery department.
Yes, this never felt like it was going to be a big deadline. Like, unless that they continued at the pace of being 10-15 and they just never figured it out this year, maybe we would have been talking about some other kind of trades.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Then it becomes way more likely that they say goodbye to Myles Turner early. But yeah, this was never going to be the year where it was going to be a big deadline year. Like they've had those the last couple. It was just one of those years where they just had a small, tiny thing that they definitely needed to do. They got it done. So, grade them if you want. Check mark, probably it's a kindergarten level score.
It was a participation grade or an attendance grade, basically.
They came.
Yes, you showed up. Only 4 teams didn't trade. So it was an active deadline still.
Who are the 4? Who are the
Minnesota, Denver. I can't remember the other 2.
Losers.
What?
Losers didn't even make any moves.
Well, I don't want to make this about not the Pacers, but I recall the Denver Nuggets suggesting all offseason that they let KCP go in the name of flexibility, and then didn't even make a trade. What flexibility have you acquired, Denver Nuggets? Tell me. I can't remember the other 2, but it's only 4. It's only 4. Everyone in the Pacers division, I guess I could just – it's not worth looking at the standings. This is boring.
Yeah,
regardless, Pacers, that's it. We will assess this. I will do a What the Pacers Can Still Do This Season podcast probably during the All-Star break. I usually do it right after the deadline, but I will not do it this year. I would like to see them play a little bit. After this, Rick's going to address the media in LA later today. This should be out before that game, so check out Dustin Dopier's feed for all that. He is traveling with the team on this road trip. And then tomorrow, we'll have a podcast about the Clippers game and all the Pacers' new players. Wait, there will be no talk of anything different. The Clippers might look very different for this game, which will be interesting to see what kind of team they get, but they have all their stars still a tough one. Derek, thank you for the time. Where can people find you and the things you might say about this trade and definitely say about the team?
Yeah, you can find me on Blue Sky at iPacers, Twitter at iPacersblog. You can find any of my written work at iPacers.com. Yep, that's it.
And I know you're dying to dive into this trade.
So I'm going to write 3,000 words on this thing.
I don't even think it's possible. I got to 750 and I was like, I literally have nothing else I can put in.
Yeah, I just start copying and pasting the same thing.
Even at 750, I was like, man, this is dry. So back tomorrow / later today / whenever you're listening to this, talking Pacers Clippers, seeing the same look Pacers against the new Clippers. Everybody give Derek a follow. Thanks for listening. See you soon.